Welcome to New York University, Casa Italiana zerilli-marimò. It's a very special evening tonight that we want to dedicate completely to the angel of Central Park, its sculptress, and to Maria Teresa Cometto that dig out of the past the story of Emma Ebbings, of the beautiful statue that still cherishes anybody who goes to Central Park. So we're going to find out a lot about this statue and its author. And we're going to start with a short documentary, it's 3 minutes, that we produced as part of our ongoing series, Nuova York, Hidden in Plain Sight. And it's a series that we started about a year ago. It's dedicated to the signs of an Italian presence of some way or another in New York City. And some of the signs are very obvious, like the statue of Dante in front of Lincoln Center, pretty obvious sign of Italian presence, right? And there are others that are not as obvious, like the angel of the Bethesda Fountain. And these are actually the part that I find more interesting and engaging, to go beyond the obvious Italian element and dig out and to see what is Italian about it. One was, of course, Maria Teresa's discoveries related to the angel. And of course, there is another one that is the bull of Wall Street, the raging bull. He is also Italian. And you can take a look at our documentary to see why that too is Italian. So it's part of an ongoing research that we are conducting here at the Casa. And I would like to show you first the documentary, then tell you something more, and then I will invite our guest to the stage to talk about the angel that is the protagonist of tonight. Please roll the doc.
This is one of the most iconic places in New York City. Countless movies have been filmed here, and this is the only statue that was commissioned and paid by Central Park. But almost nobody knows that the angel was born in Rome, in Italy, and was created by Emma Stebbins, who was the first woman to receive a public art commission in New York City. Emma Stebbins was a New Yorker. She was born here in 1815. She wanted to be a sculptor, but in New York City and in the United States, there were no real schools to teach how to sculpt. So in 1856, she moved to Rome, where she was able to study all the antique statues at the Vatican Museums, the Capitoline Museums, Villa Borghese. She was also able to find the best teachers and mentors in Rome. Indeed, between the 1850s and 1870s, Rome was the place to be for an artist, and especially for a sculptor. The artistic scene was very lively, the best marble from Carrara was available, and for American women like Emma Stebbins, there were personal reasons too. Far away from their families and from the conventions of Victorian society, they were free in everything, free even to live a relationship out of the traditional box. Emma did that. In Rome, she met the very famous American actress Charlotte Cushman. They fell in love with each other and they lived together as a married couple forever. Some critics say that The Angel of the Waters is a tribute by Emma to her companion because the angel is androgynous. Charlotte Cushman used to play both male and female roles. The four putti under the Angel of the Waters are symbol of temperance, purity, health, and peace. Emma got the commission in 1863 because at that time she was one of the most famous American sculptors, and it didn't hurt that her brother Henry Stebbins was one of the commissioners of Central Park. What is certain is that the Bethesda Fountain had to celebrate the first aqueduct that in 1842 brought fresh water to New York City. In the program of the inauguration that happened in 1873, Emma wrote that according to John's Gospel, there were a lot of sick people who lay around the Bethesda pool in Jerusalem, waiting for an angel who every now and then would go down and stir up the water. The first into the pool would be healed. Emma pointed out that in New York City it is the pure water that brings health and consolation like an angel, but not every now and then, but every day, always. Emma was very reserved and private, so she was soon forgotten. That's why I decided to write her biography, to remember her and to pay a tribute to a fantastic woman and artist and lover of Italy.
And while I ask Maria Teresa and Eve to please come to the stage, I would like to recognize that in the audience we have our videographer, who is not only the person who makes the video and does the shooting, but also does iconographical research, editing, coordinates with the animators. I assure you that to produce 3 minutes of film like this, it takes a long time and a lot of brain and research. And I would like to ask you to thank Eugenio Pizzorno back there. Eugenio, stand up, stand up, stand up. Stand up. Thank you. And we have many more projects going on, and we have already recorded several. I invite you to take a look at our website and our YouTube channel, Nuova York. We have already documentaries on the sculpture of Fiorello La Guardia, Verdi, Dante, and all the other ones, but also stores like Di Palo and Raffetto that for 105, 110 years have made the same thing in the same shop in the Italian way. So take a look and decide whatever you want to concentrate on. But tonight we're going to talk about Emma Ebbings and the Angel of Waters. And to do this, we have the expert on Emma Ebbings. Maria Teresa first published the book in Italian, and then after the publication in Italian, Bordighera Press, and I would like to thank my friend and colleague Anthony Tamburri that saw it right to make this book available in English for the American public. I think it's almost more interesting for the Americans than for the Italians. So it was great to have it in English now also. And the last time Maria Teresa was here, I think we talked about another one of your books, about another woman, almost forgotten, this time a writer, Marchesa Colombi. And that was in the middle of the pandemic, so we did that on Zoom. We didn't have the pleasure of being together. But again, it's part of your ongoing research of finding stories about extraordinary women that were too soon forgotten or not enough celebrated even in their own time. So I think I see a sort of continuity between the Marchesa Colombi and Emma Ebbings. And next to Maria Teresa, who is, of course, the author of the book, we have Eve Kahn, who's the vice president of the Victorian Society here in New York. And I would like, when you start talking, if you tell us something about what the society does, because I think it's worth mentioning and many people might be interested here. And of course, we're talking about Victorian New York. And with Emma being a product of that society on some level, a product and also wanting to escape from it on some level. And Eve is an independent scholar. She wrote 2 fundamental biographical books about an artist and a writer. And she's right now working on a new project, The Queen of Bohemia, and we are looking forward to present it here. Please welcome them. Why Eve don't you yeah,
oh, okay. Yes, we're sitting here quietly struggling with the technology. I'm Eve Kahn, and I just wanted to give you a sentence or two about the Victorian Society's New York chapter. We were founded in 1966. We're the kernel of the Victorian Society in America. VicSocNY.org, we do a ton of programs. We do lectures, we do concerts, we do preservation advocacy, we testify at every single Landmarks Commission hearing about buildings dating from the Gilded Age and the long 19th century. We give out awards for preservation, we give out awards for scholarship. We have a blowout annual meeting coming up on June 5th, where we're going to give out awards to a fascinating selection of people. We have an annual Emerging Scholars event, which some of you may know about. We literally get proposals for studies of the most amazing things that you've never thought about before in some angle of the Gilded Age. We had someone speak on the history of the escalator the other night, and it's meant to be called the escalator. How great is that? So we have a lot of fun. That's the short introduction. So,
Thank you very much, Eve. And so we decided tonight that since Maria Teresa kindly prepared a few extra images that were not included in the film that you saw for us, we're going to start with her exposition of those images, and Eve and I will intervene and maybe ask questions or make comments. And then at a certain point, we're also going to open to you, our audience. Thank you. And if you're following online and if you have any question, please write them in the dialogue section of the YouTube channel, and Julian in some way or another will be able to make them arrive in my iPad.
Thank you so much, Stefano, for having me here. So happy to be back, and so happy to talk about Emma Stebbins with Eve, who has helped me also for my research. And especially thanks again to Eugenio, who did a very, very good job with the documentary. So I very briefly touched everything in the video, and so I would go deep in some aspects of it. So the first slide, please, Julian. Okay. So this is a map of Rome around mid-19th century. As I said in the video, Rome was the place to be for artists at that time. It was the place to be, especially for Americans, because in America there was not any school for sculptures. And Emma started studying art at the National Academy of Design, that is still there, but it was mostly painting, and she understood very early that if she wanted to become a professional sculptor, had to move to Italy and to Rome. And you see in yellow the area where all the American sculptors and international artists would live. So it's around Piazza di Spagna, Trinità dei Monti, Villa Borghese, Villa Medici, where there was the French Academy, and the Palazzo Barberini, where there was already the gallery open to the public. Emma and Charlotte initially lived in Via del Corso, and then they moved to Via Gregoriana, which is down from Trinità dei Monti towards Palazzo Barberini. Piazza di Spagna was especially important because on the steps, there they would be all the models, the Roman people who would be hired by the artist, and it's funny, and I described it in the book, that there were people specializing, like in shepherds, in Madonnas, in brigands, in small kids, and so they would stay there the whole day waiting for somebody to hire them, and they were paid very well. So next slide, please. Okay, so this is a drawing. We don't know the author, but the title is "The Sister Sculptresses Taking a Ride." Miss Hosmer, you see the name there, and on Ivan is the name of the horse, and Miss Stebbins on Carl. So Emma Stebbins was friends with Harriet Hosmer, the first American sculptor, woman sculptor, moving to Rome in 1852. She was the first one. And so they went to Rome to become professional sculptors, but they had also a lot of fun. They were living the dolce vita. So one of the things they did was riding horses. They had horses, many of them, and they would ride in the Campagna, first of all, but also in the city. And the male sculptors were very jealous, very envious of the female, because they were very successful, they had a lot of fun. And so I'm reading you from a letter by William Story, an American sculptor in Rome in those years. And he wrote, Hattie, the name for friends of Harriet Hosmer, Hattie takes a high hand here with Rome and would have the Romans know that a Yankee girl can do anything she pleases, walk alone, ride a horse alone, and laugh at their rules. So, so they were known for being quite transgressive.
Naughty.
Naughty, exactly, naughty.
And I have a question right for you, and we mentioned it before. So we are talking about 1850, 1870, that's the 20 years that Emma and Charlotte spent in Rome, on and off, because we know that they did not spend the entire year, but large part of the year, let's say, svernavano, as we would say in Italian. They spent the cold months in Rome, and then for fear of malaria, they would go somewhere else. So these are the 20 worst years in Roman history if you listen to traditional Italian historiography. These are the last 20 years of the temporal rule of the popes. It's when the popes become even more rigid in applying their very strict rules regarding morality and everything else. It's the years in which there is the repression of all the liberals. The last execution, Monti and Tognetti, the two, we would call them now freedom fighters or terrorists, depending on the perspective that you have on things, that were executed in 1868 to large reaction from all over the world. So Rome was not, if you listen to, again, to the historians, or when we went to school in Italy, was at its worst in terms of liberticida, like no freedom at all, no freedom of expression. And reading your book, we have a completely different impression of Rome, that these American ladies found in Rome the freedom that they couldn't find in New York. How is that possible? What kind of Rome really was there at this point?
Yeah, I question, I try to answer this question because, of course, it's a fundamental question. And the answer is not easy, it's complicated. It is true that Rome was a free zone for these women. They found total freedom from the artistic point of view, of course, and they were free to innovate. For example, Emma Stebbins was the first woman, American woman sculptor to make a sculpture of a naked male for Victorian society and for the puritanical mindset in America. Already the women, the female, knew there was scandalous. You can't imagine the male. And instead, her very first statue was the Lotus Eater, who was a boy, totally naked. And also, she made another couple of statues that we may talk about later that was very innovative. But, so there were professional reasons to go there, but also was very important the freedom away from the Victorian obligations. And so they were 8 women, a group that never before and never after happened to be all together, women sculptors from America. Henry James, if I can mention, called them with kind of a condescendence, but with a very, proper definition. He called them, where is it? It was a strange sisterhood of American lady sculptors who at one time settled upon the 7 hills in a white marmorian flock.
White marmorian flock on the 7 hills.
Yeah.
I mean, from what I've read of women, American women's diaries and letters who went over to Italy in the late 19th century, it may have seemed repressive to the Italians, but they were escaping from gossip and their tiny little communities where, you know, there were so many rigid, as you said, Maria Teresa, there were so many rigid expectations for them. The newspapers were, if they had money, the newspapers were following them, documenting their every move. In Rome, they were just weird Americans. And no, I don't think anyone cared, right? They could do what they want. And right, there was no one pressuring them to marry, right? Once they got to Rome, everyone just threw up their hands and gave up hope on them, I think. Also particularly for women from New England, their letters are fascinating when they get to Italy because they fall in love with Italian Catholic material culture, right? They had known so many rigid Protestant churches that, austere and unmuraled and undecorated. The letters that they write about being fascinated by the religious processions and the clothes of the priests, the nuns, they'd fall in love with all of this.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have noticed a repressive
side of it.
No.
But that's very interesting as a key to read their experience. And for the Romans, they were such an external body that nobody would bother them.
Yes, exactly. It was a very small community. Almost all of them didn't speak Italian. Yeah, they.
never know what the regime is.
Yeah, they dealt only either with the servants or with the aristocrats. In fact, for example, they went, talking about riding a horse, they went fox hunting with the Roman aristocrats and the British aristocrat. So the popes, the priests didn't care of them. There is an historian, art historian, German, Karl Justi, who was in that time in Rome, and he wrote in a letter that Rome was so free for foreigners and for women, quote, because of that letting go, which is the praiseworthy custom of the regime of priests outside the sphere of their particular needs, unquote. So they didn't bother the popes and the priests. It's true there was a lot of censorship. In fact, the only newspaper that was allowed to be printed in Rome was the Vatican, the Giornale di Roma, I think it was. I went to the archives in Rome to look for some information. There was nothing about the American community.
Under the radar.
Under the radar. I even asked a friend who was working on the former secret archives of the Vatican, asking if they had any file, any police file about these women. Nothing at all.
They were lost souls anyway, so why should they bother, right?
Exactly.
They're American, Protestants.
Right.
Exactly. That's the most...
It's a fascinating aspect, right? This coexistence of two completely different cultures and ethics under the same roof that is Rome.
Yeah.
Please continue. I don't want to
No, yeah. But at the same time... No. I'm so happy to be interrupted and have this real conversation with you, and then with the public in a while. It's also ironic that even in America they would chiudere un occhio, how do you say? They would allow. They were even called the Boston marriage, in another phrase coined by Henry James. Because according to the puritanical mentality, women couldn't have sexual desires. So all these couples were chaste. Very hypocritical way of thinking, but they were thought to be chaste. And there were many of them, many relationships. Some of them, they were really chaste. For example, among teachers, women teachers who would lose their job if they got married. So they stayed single, but then feeling lonely, sometimes they would live together, simply like real friends. But at the opposite, they were real relationships, like the one between Emma and Charlotte. Charlotte, in a letter to another woman, would say, don't you know that I am already married and I have the ring on my third finger? So they were openly living as a married couple, which is amazing, being more than 150 years ago.
in Rome.
In Rome,
Right. No,
exactly.
she calls Emma Mrs. Stebbins.
Yes.
Charlotte, her own wife, calls her Mrs. in these letters. It's amazing to me that they put so much in print that would have gotten them in trouble in the States.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe next slide. Oh, yes, this was another way of having fun in Rome, not only for the skull dresses, but also for tourists. This is the cover of a very famous guide for Americans going to Rome. And you see, one of the pastimes was to go to the Vatican at night. that's a group of tourists, and you see there is a torch illuminating not all the body of the guy, not the private parts, but so that was a very famous way of enjoying the art in Rome. Next slide. And of course, Emma and the other leading sculptors would go to the most important museums where they would study the Greek and Roman statues. This is Braccio Nuovo in the Vatican, and this is, I was lucky to be there, unfortunately, during almost still the COVID, so there was nobody there. And it is exactly as it was hundreds of years ago. So Braccio Nuovo, Villa Borghese, Palazzo Barberini, the Musei Capitolini, they were all places to visit, to study, because the first thing to do for a sculpture was to copy the models and to learn very well, the neoclassical style they were.
So is this pre-plaster cast? They're over there before all the Americans or the American museums are buying up plaster cast.
Yeah.
Right? They didn't. The only way to have access to this was to travel. It wasn't that you could go to the Met, which used to have hundreds and hundreds of plaster casts made from sculpture and architectural elements from the ancient and medieval Renaissance world.
Yeah, and this was real marble.
and it was real. Right.
Real marble, exactly. Next slide. Okay, so this is the couple. Emma is standing and Charlotte is the one seated. The photo was taken in around 1858, so just after 1 year then they met. They met the first winter that Emma was in Rome. And Charlotte was very famous for having salons where all kind of artists, intellectuals, performers would go, and it's there that they met, and they immediately fell in love. It is the only photo of a couple that I found, because as I was mentioning before, the American women sculptors were 8, and 4 of them lived with a companion who was a woman. So quite an impressive percentage. But the others don't have a photo taken together like Emma and Charlotte, who was so probably the most open couple at that time, and also the
famous, right? Because Charlotte was very famous.
Charlotte was very, very famous. Emma was from New York. She was born in New York in 1815, and Charlotte was born in Boston the year after, 1816. And Charlotte was the most famous Shakespearean actor, I would say, both in America and in England, which was quite amazing. And in fact, she was so successful and so rich that she could afford to buy a house in Rome, in Via Gregoriana, when they decided to live together. And it was a 4-floor house. It's still there, but there is nothing left of their staying there. So she was very rich by herself, and Emma also was pretty rich, but Charlotte was also kind of a manager of Emma, because Emma was very shy, very reserved, and it was Charlotte pushing for commissions, for being paid the right compensation. And Charlotte was very good with herself. In fact, so she became famous first in England, and when a New York theater called her back and asked her to come back to New York and to perform in New York, she said, well, I will come back only if I will be paid the same amount of my partner, the male actor. And she obtained that, which is something that in Hollywood...
it's not there yet.
No, it's not happening yet. Exactly.
And but she will also play male roles. She was a very famous Romeo, right?
Very famous Romeo. You saw during the video.
Yes.
We may find it a little funny or strange, but at that time it was totally normal. And I read articles, reviews in London newspapers saying that she was the best Romeo ever seen on stage in London. So
It's quite a revenge if you think that the first Shakespearean plays were presented with males playing also the female roles.
yeah.
And that Charlotte reversed the thing, and it was a woman playing also the male roles.
Right. And Sarah Bernhardt was famous as Hamlet, right? Sarah
Yeah.
Bernhardt was one of the great Hamlets of our time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. A little later, I think. Yes, a little later. Yeah, here we are talking.
Charlotte blazed a trail.
Yeah, exactly. Next slide. Okay, so this is Harriet Hosmer again on a horse, and here a portrait, official portrait. You see in her right hand there are the tools of her profession of sculpting, and she was very masculine. In fact, Nathaniel Hawthorne, the American writer, exactly, who lived in Rome between 58 and 59 with his family. He wrote in his memoir that when he met her, he thought she was a boy. She was small and very childish kind. And she was the most ebullient and the most commercial-oriented among all her colleagues. And in fact, there are 2 or 3 biographies of Harriet Hosmer in English, while there was none about Emma Stebbins. That's why I wrote the biography.
So yours is the first also in English?
Also in English, yes. Amazingly.
Yeah.
And you know, I started looking into her life, her story, because I go often to Central Park. I live nearby, and I love, of course, the Bethesda Fountain, the Bethesda Terrace, and the Angel of the Waters. And I don't know if you ever noticed, there is only a very small plaque on one wall of the terrace mentioning Emma Stebbins. There was no big celebration. You know, they inaugurated the fountain in 1873, and by the way, in 11 days it is the anniversary because it was inaugurated in May the 31st, 1873. But when it was inaugurated, she was already forgotten because she had retired to take care of her companion who was sick. I was saying that I discovered her story reading an article on the New York Times in 2019, I think, for the series Overlooked No More. Because when she died in 1882, no newspapers in New York published an obituary, which is, the usual homage to an important New Yorker. And they didn't publish even the news about her, her death, which was very sad. And so the Overlooked No More was a very short summary of her life. It got me intrigued.
Enough to get you interested.
Absolutely. Because she was a New Yorker, and then she worked and created the Angel of the Waters in Rome. Go back a second. Lady Ashburton was the main lover of Harriet Hosmer, lover and supporter and so on. Mm-hmm. Next. This instead, unfortunately, so another sculpture was Margaret Foley. We don't have any photo of hers. And instead I discovered this medallion, this marble medallion, that is a portrait of Emma Stebbins. They were very close friends. And it is in a private collection in Maine, one of the many places I visited for my research. Margaret Foley shared her home in Rome with her companion, another sculptor, but English, Elizabeth Lizzie Hadwin. Next. This is Anne Whitney. Anne Whitney, we have a photo of Anne with her partner, Abby Adeline Manning, but it was very late in their life, and it's not in Rome. And this is the most famous sculpture by Annie Whitney, Rome, and it is the portrait of a beggar, an old beggar. So Annie Whitney, so this is, I mean, again, an irony, because all these Americans, the artists and the tourists, they loved Rome, but also they despised Rome. So they despised the beggars around, being cheated by, merchants, the dirtiness on the streets, blah, blah, blah. But they were fascinating at the same time.
And so much so that you mentioned in the book, as soon as Rome becomes Italian, so it starts the modernization of Rome, they all leave. They're not interested in a clean Rome. They're not interested in a modern Rome. As much as they despise
they want to be thronged by beggars.
Yeah.
Right. They want to not be able to walk down the street without someone.
The
with their hand
fascination
out, right, and
ceases completely and suddenly. Right?
Yes.
And they'll go to Paris.
I mention in my book a passage of the Marble Faun, again by Nathan Hawthorne, and he says, as soon as we leave Rome and we leave finally the smell, the cheating, and it's a long, long list of complaints against Rome. But then he says, as soon as we leave home, we feel already nostalgic of Rome. We want to already go back to Rome. Yeah, but with the Piedmontese going to Rome and started cleaning and painting the walls of the old houses and so on, they really all left and they all went to Paris. Paris became the international the center for international artists at the end of 19th century and especially then the beginning of the 20th century.
It has to do with the whole idea of the picturesque, and Eve, probably that's very much in your core, like the idea of picturesque that is also the unclean, the uncared, and all that. It was a very British idea, but it was absorbed through also by the Americans, right? And Rome was all that.
As I understand it, that there were models not only waiting on the street to be hired, but if you were known as an expat artist, they would knock on your door. And they would assume a pose, right? They would come. The particularly craggy-faced guy would knock on your door and offer his services. They would knock on artists' doors with supplies, right? Painting supplies. I don't know if they came around with carving supplies, but definitely paintbrushes and paints.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So, for example, another pastime was to go at night in the Colosseum, that was full of grass and even plants, trees, because it was totally neglected. And to stay there, especially under the full moon, reciting Byron, stuff like that, yes. And so when the Piedmontese arrived and cleaned the grass and everything, it was not as romantic.
Wrong move, Piedmontese.
Exactly. Next. Julian? Oh, okay. So these, very briefly, are the other four women sculptors. Louise Lander. Her most famous sculpture is Virginia Dare, which is a beautiful, it is after this legend of the very first English colony in America, in the Roanoke Island in North Carolina. And you can see the statue there in the Elizabeth Gardens, I think. The other one is Florence Flore Freeman. We know very little about her, but she was a very good friend of Emma, and in fact, this bust is called Sandalphon, and it was the subject of a statue also by Emma Stebbins. Edmonia Lewis, who has become more famous recently. She was the only one of mixed race. The father was African American, the mother was Native American. And this is Forever Free, that was at the Metropolitan Museum a few months ago in an exhibition. And the last one, Vinnie Riem, the last to go to Rome in 1869. She got the commission to do the full length statue of Abraham Lincoln that is in the Rotunda in Washington, D.C. So they were pretty accomplished, all of them. Next. Ah, okay, no, this is, okay, go back. We can do, okay. So the last slides are about the other works by Emma Stebbins that you can see in New York. This is a Christopher Columbus in Brooklyn, in front of the Supreme Court of the New York State. Very few people go there.
I mean, I went for a friend's citizenship ceremony in that courthouse.
Okay, so you go there for bureaucratic reasons.
But I never even noticed that statue was there, let alone.
Really?
And I had no idea.
It's very high.
Up.
It's very high.
It's on this very severe-looking column. I paid no attention to it. Sorry.
Okay, good.
I didn't know I would be on the stage, having to admit that at some point.
And it was commissioned by a rich financier in New Yorker, Marshall was his name, Marshall. And I learned that Christopher Columbus was an American idol, an American theme for a lot of artists, way before it became a symbol of pride for Italian American. So many painters and sculptors did portrait of Christopher Columbus, and in fact, American male sculptor who was in Rome at that time, Rogers, Richard Rogers, right? Yes, I think. Anyway, he did the bronze doors of the Capitol in Washington, D.C., that are scenes from the life of Christopher Columbus, who was kind of an American hero because he was the underdog, sailing towards the unknown, not knowing where he would arrive and doubting if ever he succeed. So he was that kind of ideal.
Not perceived as the other, as the Italian or the at the service of the Spanish crown, but the symbol of thirst for knowledge and passion for discovery. Exactly
that. Yes.
Very interesting.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, Charlotte, when she's dying, she asked Emma to read a poem by Tennyson, I think, about Christopher Columbus. Yeah. And here the pose is the last night before arriving to America, finally. So he's Emma imagines that he's wondering, oh, shall I make it or not? Because the crew is in mutiny, right?
Yeah.
So, and they left him one last night to find something. Okay, so this is Christopher Columbus. Next. This is, you can see the resemblance with the four cherubs, the four putti and the angel of the waters, because the model is the same. Is one is the son of a sister of Emma, who as well went to Rome, and she married an English painter. So Samuel, you can see him in the loose visible storage and study center at the Brooklyn Museum of Art. It's a small marble statue. Apart Christopher Columbus, all the other marbles of Emma were small because they did everything by herself. While all the other neoclassical sculptures, they used Italian carvers, Italian artisans who were very, very good. From Canova down, they would use...
You would call them scalpellini because they would do the first cut, right? They would take away all the stuff and then the sculpture would only arrive to do the finishing touches. And
Exactly. Instead,
and Emma did the whole thing.
Emma did the whole thing, and that's why she got sick, because of the marble dust that she breathed.
Wait, so the others did a clay maquette, or no? Or they...
Yeah, they first did the clay.
Right,
yes.
right. But she finished it all off. The others would have handed off the project. Almost done.
The other would do the first marble work, the most heavy.
And then farm it out.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. And last, I think, Okay, this is one of the brothers of Emma Stebbins, John Wilson. Her brothers, two of her brothers, this one and Harry, were Wall Street brokers and bankers. But they were all lovers of art. They were the first supporters of Emma. And John Wilson Stebbins was also the president of the very first public library in New York, the Mercantile Library. And this statue is in the Center for Fiction in Brooklyn. That is the heir of the Mercantile Library. It's very well done. Do we have other? Oh, yes. And these are the two statues that I mentioned before. This is industry or the miner, and the commerce or the sailor. And they were already also commissioned by a very wealthy merchant to advertise his businesses, the mines and shipping. But Emma Stebbins took the opportunity to innovate. She was the first neoclassical sculpture to portray workers in their own working. Not in classicized, yes, exactly. And in fact, the reviews at that time said, "Oh, that's really brave. Nobody else dared do anything like that, because usually they would drape them, you know, with the Greek or Roman toga and stuff like that."
There was less to sculpt if you went for a gown, right?
Exactly.
Pants, it's a lot more.
And you can see them at the Action Museum in Long Island, which is a beautiful small museum. And big news, I was told, and I hope it will become a reality, that next year, yes, 2025, they will have an exhibition all about works by Emma Stebbins, because now they have only these two, yes, and they are collecting new works and lending and so on.
We'll go, and you're going to be our tour guide for that. Just
Yes.
the friends of the casa.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
why
we'll
not?
go
Thank
together.
you. Thank you for
And I
for
didn't know
the
about
idea.
that. This is great news.
Yeah,
It's probably also on the importance of your book. that
absolutely.
Bringing up this author and creating a buzz and curiosity around her and around her work.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think we can also open to questions of the public, but I have a question. But first, let's thank Maria Teresa for her fascinating, pioneering research work, and the work that she does very often brings her to study for days and days and days in archives, museums, libraries,
'Cause you-
alone or with her research assistant,
I
Glauco
just want to
Maggi.
interrupt for one second,
Glauco.
because you have no idea how heroic what Maria Teresa did is, because there are virtually no letters. She had to do an entire book with 2 surviving letters? 3?
Good question. So there are no surviving letters between Charlotte and Emma, because they were so hot. Because I saw the other letters between Charlotte and another lover that were really, really hot. So Charlotte asked Emma to destroy the letters, and Emma obeyed. So there are no letters surviving from Charlotte and Emma. Instead, fortunately, there are letters between Charlotte and the other lover, and in them, Charlotte very often talks about Emma, about the struggles of Emma, who was always, she was very self-critical, so she was never satisfied with her work and so on. And so those letters survives, and then there are a few letters between Emma and Anne Whitney, the best friend she had, talking about work, about the future, and so on. And I found, yes, 2 letters in the house of one of the descendants of Emma Stebbins. They are both to Henry Stebbins, the older brother of Emma, who was the very first supporting Emma. But at a certain point, Emma's family was not very happy with this Boston or non-Boston marriage. Charlotte's family was not happy because they thought that that Charlotte was wasting too much money with her artist companion. On the other hand, instead, the Emma's family, that was kind of blue blood in New York City, they were instead concerned about,
Reputation.
Exactly, their reputation. So they tried to obstacle this relationship. And both letters are one from Charlotte asking forgiveness because she had business with Henry Stebbins, because, as I said, he was a broker, and she had given money to manage to him, and she was not satisfied with the results, with the with the performance of her stocks.
Yes.
Exactly. And Emma also knew about this problem, and she tells her brother that she still loves him and she wants to stay close to him and so on. So they were these two very interesting letters. Yeah.
Anyway, what I was saying is that she spent a lot of time alone in libraries, archives, museums, and this is one of the chances that she has really to talk about this with people and getting a response. So your questions, comments are welcome, even if you have not read the book yet. Please ask, and there are copies of the book for you upstairs to buy, and Maria Teresa will be happy to sign them. Please. We have another historian here asking the question.
Thank you so much. What a fascinating evening. We love to find these. Oh, no, I don't. Well, my name is Kenneth Davis, and I write some history books too, but...
like several dozen history books? I strongly suggest you look him up.
So my first question is really about history. Did you say the statue was commissioned in 1863?
Yes, the official commission was in 1963. Initially, the Central Park shouldn't have had any statue, according to Olmsted, who was the landscape architect. He thought of Central Park as, a kind of a mountain landscape where people, especially poor people, because he had a very democratic vision of his art. So imagine the workers living in these tenements building here in Lower East Side, going there and imagining to be on vacation in the Catskills or, I don't know, in the Adirondacks. And so he didn't want any statue. But the other architect, Vaux, instead who was the real architect with monuments and so on, he wanted the center of the park celebrated in some way. And so he designed the Bethesda terrace, and he wanted a fountain in the center. And the only input that Emma Stebbins had was to celebrate the arrival of the first aqueduct in 1842.
My question specifically was about the fact that 1863 was about as dark a moment in American history as there could be. Mm-hmm. Gettysburg and the draft riots in New York. Mm-hmm. And so the idea that they were even thinking about putting statues up in the midst of the civil wars is rather extraordinary. And the part of the question is also, how did the statue get here?
Yeah, so very good question. So they wanted this monument at the center, and after the start of the Civil War, I learned, studying history, that New York City became even richer. They were profiting from war. It was golden years for New York City. They had a lot of money. And also they were proud to be the symbol of culture and emancipation against the Confederate States. So spending more money for this project was kind of, in this idea of showing that they cared for culture, art, and so on. And that's why they decided to do this. And it is the only public commission decided by Central Park and paid by Central Park, because all the other statues that you see in Central Park, they are proposed, accepted by the commissioners, and paid by private citizens. All the others that you see, they are private. So this is the only public commission. And so they went on, and then it took 10 years to arrive to New York City, because first of all, as I said, Emma was very meticulous, very precise, very, never satisfied. So it took, I think, 3 or 4 winters to finish the modeling. Then it was sent to Munich in Germany for the bronze casting, because in Munich at that time there was the most important foundry for artistic work. Then the Franco-Prussian War burst, and so it was stuck in Munich. Then there were problems with payment from Central Park. So then the statue arrived in New York City in '71. But at that time, New York, the finance of the city were in very poor state because of Tammany Hall, because the city administration was in the hands of this very corrupted mayor and all his, they were called the 40 Thieves, I think, yes. And by the way, the commission that denounced everything was chaired by Henry Stebbins, the older brother of Emma Stebbins. So it arrived in '71, but there was no money. Finally, in '72, the Tammany Hall was defeated, new mayor, new administration, and so in '73, finally, there was the inauguration. But even at that time, the inauguration wasn't a big event because probably, again, for money, and also because Henry Stebbins didn't want, to show that he was too...
His own sister that...
Exactly. And and so it was a very low-profile ceremony. And the funny thing I found that it was that most of the people at the ceremony, that 31st of May, 1873, they were of German heritage, because they were proud of the bronze cast
in Munich.
In Munich, exactly.
It's great. There is a little piece for everybody.
Yes.
The Italians, the German.
Exactly. So the article on the newspaper said that these German families went there, they cheered a little, and they went to take a beer at the restaurant nearby. Yeah.
Yes.
If people are interested, there's a bust of Charlotte Cushman in the Hall of Fame of Great Americans in the Bronx.
Yes.
I don't know who the sculpture is, though. I don't know who the sculpture is.
No.
She was she was as famous as Edwin Booth.
Yes. In fact, the only 2 statues of actors, it's him and Charlotte.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if anybody ever went to this Hall of Fame. The first Hall of Fame in America is in this college in the Bronx, which was the first campus of NYU.
NYU's arts campus. Yes,
NYU was there, then went bankrupt, basically, and they had to sell the place, and they came downtown. Yes.
Also, apropos of Columbus, I mean, it's kind of trivia, but the Vanderlyn Rotunda at the Met, John Vanderlyn, who painted that, also painted Columbus's landing in the New World in the dome, in the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., and he was sent to Paris by Aaron Burr. Aaron Burr was his patron. So there's your next book.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's wonderful, too. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Do you have any more questions? Yes. We just wait for the microphone because we are live streaming and recording.
You've shown us 2 different techniques, the marble statue and then the casting. Did she do any other cast statues, or was the angel the only one?
No, there is another one, a public statue as well, Horace Mann. Horace Mann in Boston. It is in front of the state capitol. It's one of the important statues there. And it's interesting because that commission was thanks to Charlotte, who was from Boston. And when Horace Mann died, immediately there was, Horace Mann is named to be the father of the public school system in America, right? So immediately the Bostonians created a committee for a monument, and Charlotte Cushman, who was the first promoter and manager of Emma Stebbins, was friends with many members of the committee, so she convinced them to give the commission to Emma Stebbins. And but at a certain point, again, there were money problems, and then Charlotte Cushman, who was a friend of the editor of the monthly, what's called yes, thank you, the Atlantic Month. She wrote a letter to him saying, "Oh, please." Find somebody to write a poem, an obituary about Horace Mann, and I will recite, I will do a performance in theaters, raising fund for the Horace Mann statue." And so,
by my wife.
exactly, so the women will raise the statue to Horace Mann. And it happened exactly like that, yes.
It's another great story in and of itself, Maria Teresa.
Yeah, also because even there, they don't know who is Emma Stebbins.
Yeah. Yes?
Yes, hi. We were talking about the Columbus statue in Brooklyn. And many of the Columbus statues are under fire for being, you know, part of a gentleman who had a dark side to him. And many are advocating for the removal of Columbus statues from anywhere and everywhere. How do you think Emma would react today if she was in this generation, knowing about that side of Christopher Columbus?
I think she would be very confused, very confused. And confused, for example, attending one of the meetings talking about the removal of Columbus's statue. I read that there was a committee in Brooklyn trying to remove that statue, and you can find the meeting online, and it's fascinating because at a certain point one guy says, "Oh, but it is a statue made by a lesbian artist," and.
Okay, so let's keep it.
Yes, but another guy said, "Oh, who cares about the lesbian? He was a genocide promoter." So there was a very interesting discussion. Fortunately, it's staying there. It's not being removed.
Thank you. If we don't have any other questions, I would like to ask you to thank once again Maria Teresa Cometto for the book she wrote, for the research she did, and also Yves Kahn for being here with us tonight. And we'll be waiting for you in the Queen of Bohemia. The book is upstairs for you. It's Emma and the Angel of Central Park. Maria Teresa Cometto is going to be happy to sign it for you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know there is also a leaflet or something for the people who want to buy it online. There is a code for a discount online.
Thank you all again very much.